Preview. Preview.
Greetings dear W124 friends, fans and owners. It's Ivica speaking. And in this part we're going to talk about the CISE or the Ke-Jetronic. This is the second part, and in this part I'm going to talk about how to diagnose malfunctions on the system, so stay tuned. Let's begin from the mechanics. The fuel pump. In order to check your fuel pump, simply jack up the car and take off the lid, 10mm wrench. Then start up the car and listen to the pump while it is working constantly. If the pump makes noise, as a V-belt does, something like this, then you should know for sure that you must replace the pump. While operating, the pump must be heard like this. And while the engine is running, the pump should be heard like this. There is one more test how you can test your pump if it is good operational or not. The pump must deliver 6 bar pressure. So, you see, on the fuel distributor you have 2 lines, one on the upper chamber and one on the lower chamber. On the upper chamber, where the cold start valve is connected, you measure the raw pressure. The raw pressure is the pressure coming from the pump. The system or the modified pressure is the pressure modified by EHA valve. So, the difference between these two pressures is 0.4 bar. So, if you have anything below 5.5 bar pressure or below 5, then you should know that you have a faulty pump. The fuel filter. It has to be replaced each 50k kilometers or 30k miles. The fuel accumulator. Start the car. Let it run for a bit, then stop the car. Afterwards, deflect the sensor plate. If the plate makes no resistance, the accumulator is bad and has to be replaced. The fuel distributor. There is the raw pressure and the system pressure, as I've already said. The raw pressure is the one coming from the pump. The system pressure is a modified pressure by the EHA valve. For the raw pressure to measure, you must disconnect the cold start valve and mount the pressure gauge on its place. The system pressure you measure on the lower chamber where the single bolt is located. If you have same pressures, well, something wrong is with your fuel distributor. And that's the way how to check if your fuel distributor is good functioning or not. And for all those who are from the USA, please, if you intend to buy a car like this that has Ke-Jetronic, then please use a non-ethanol gas. because the ethanol destroys the diaphragm and the rubbers inside the fuel distributor. If the EHA leaks, then you will have to replace its two green O-rings, because a leaky EHA means loss of the pressure. There are also two O-rings on the piston inside the distributor. In order to check if the O-rings are in a good shape, you will have to take off the fuel pump relay. Put the wire in the contacts 7 and 8 and turn the ignition on in order to activate the fuel pump to work continuously. Hi guys, it's me Ivica again. And now I would like to show you how to jumpstart the fuel pump. How to make it run continuously. So you see, here is the battery. Well, it is off from the car, but behind the battery you have this protection. We'll move it aside. This is the ECU. You move it aside, and there behind, this is the fuel pump relay. You want to take it out, just push it a bit, pull, just pull it a bit, sorry. And now, here you have the contacts from 1 to 12. Well, here the contacts 7 and 8 are those we want to jump if we want to make the pump run continuously. So you take a piece of wire like this, and you simply take it and stick it in these two holes, and something like this, and as you turn the ignition on together with the battery, you'll hear the fuel pump working continuously. It's easy, really. Under the airflow meter there is a rubber, the airflow housing. As you deflect the sensor plate, you will have to measure the time for 30 seconds. If there is a gas, just like a fog in these 30 seconds, then you are okay with the O-rings. But if the rubber is all wet from gas, you must replace the O-rings. The fuel pressure regulator. If its rubber vent line is cracked and you have a gas leak, then you will have a pressure loss. The fuel pressure regulator won't hold the system pressure steady and must be replaced. If the vent line is okay and your system pressure is much lower than 5.3 bar, then you will have to stall the car, unscrew the rubber hose, the return line, and there is a 4.5 millimeter Allen screw with which you adjust the system pressure. This 4.5 millimeter Allen screw can be replaced with the Torx Allen screw T27. By turning the screw counterclockwise, the pressure is lower, clockwise it's higher. You will have to turn a quarter of a turn. The adjusting screw is very sensitive, and get that return line back, screw it, and then measure the pressure. If you have to do it again, Repeat the whole process until you get the nominal pressure value. The airflow meter. Check if its plate rubs its housing. There must not be heard a metal against metal rubbing. If there is, then you will have to make the plate resting even. Take a little hammer and a wedge and hammer this screw very carefully until you make it even. This is usually for those who drive the cars on LPG. The injectors. They are mechanical and can't be cleaned ultrasonic. They must be replaced each 150 kilometers or each 90 miles. If they are bad, then you will have a higher consumption, the engine stumbling, bad idling. In order to check them, you must perform the thing with the fuel pump relay. Take out the injectors. In order to take them out, you must take off the metal holders holding the injectors firmly. Move the metal hoses aside and tighten them on the hoses again. Under each injector, you must have a glass. Turn the ignition on. Don't start the car and deflect the sensor plate a bit. Then half its way. And then till the end and hold it for some 5 seconds just to see if they're all operational. Because if an injector doesn't atomize at all, then replace it with the one that is functional in order to see if it is about the injector or the chamber in the distributor. If all of them atomize the fuel, then let the plate off and turn the ignition off. Observe the injectors. If they drip out the fuel, non-operational, in 2 minutes, then you have bad injectors. The injectors should be tested by deflecting the plate a bit, simulating idle, half away, simulating a normal driving conditions, and fully deflected, simulating full throttle driving. But concerning the fact that you drive your car with a half of the throttle, that's your goal. Test the injectors with the plate deflected half its way at most. Everything more, the engine builds up the pressure then, and there is no need for testing the injectors then. So, the injectors must not leak, squirt, or atomize at the angle. Their stream must be like a fog spreading cone, as centered as possible, and at the same time they must start and stop atomizing fuel. If you doubt the injector, take off the spark plugs, and if they are black and sooty, then it is very possible that you have a bad injector on that cylinder. The best option is to replace all the injectors and its rubber holders. And now the electronics. The oxygen sensor. Located in front of the catalytic converter and screwed in the exhaust pipe. If you're unsure that this part has been replaced or not, try testing it first. Before you go under the car to unscrew the sensor, you must disconnect it. Its plugs are located under the passenger floor mat. Disconnect the two connectors, the white one for the heater and the red one for the signal, and take a wrench 22 and go under the car to unscrew it. Your car must be at its operating temperature. Then disconnect the sensor and stick the positive of your multimeter in the signal. The negative goes to the ground. If the sensor doesn't fluctuate between 450 and 1000 millivolts, or there is no fluctuation at all, then the sensor is bad and has to be replaced. The best is to replace it with the original one from Bosch, using part number as a reference. The oxygen sensor has to be replaced like a fuel and air filter every 50 kilometers, 30,000 miles. The coolant temperature sensor. You have to measure it twice, once the engine is cold and warm. When cold, you must get 2.5 kiloohms. When warm, the sensor must show you 350 ohms. The idle control valve. As you take it off from the engine, try to test it with a 9-volt battery. Simply attach the battery on its contacts below, and if you don't hear a clack sound, try cleaning it with a brake or carb cleaner by spraying it inside, and afterwards clean the valve with Q-tips or soak it in diesel fuel for 3 hours approximately. Clean it again with Q-tips and try them again with the thing with 9-volt battery. You must get the clack sound. If you don't succeed, then you will have to replace the valve. The throttle positioning sensor. If you doubt this part, you will have to check its cable leading from the throttle body to one place. The cable has a 3-pin connection. The middle one is for both contacts, one is for the resting position, and the other for the full throttle. The EHA valve. The EHA valve rarely goes bad. It can leak, and then you will have a pressure loss. If it leaks, unscrew 2 Torx bolts holding it and watch for 2 green O-rings. Replace them and you will feel the improvement. If not, measure it with your multimeter, and the current must be close to 0 volts. There is also an adjusting screw on the EHA when you take it off, but you will have to unscrew a meshing screw, and then you will see a hole with a 2 mm Allen screw. Counterclockwise the pressure is decreased, clockwise it's increased. The EHA has a spring and a membrane, and with time that spring gets weak and it has to be tightened. Turn just quarter of a turn, half of a turn at most. The specifications for current flowing through the coil shows that for various models, but commonly the maximum current flow is 15 milliamps in response to a throttle blip, while at idling, a steady current of about 1 milliamp is normal. No flow at all means that you have an open circuit coil, wiring or connector. The coil has a resistance of about 20 ohms, and you can check this by removing the connector and applying your multimeter. In order to get a current of 15 milliamps to flow in the coil, the applied voltage has to be about 0.3 volts. The engine with a bad EHA has a higher consumption, bad engine braking and a bad acceleration. The cutoff diesel switch. Take the connector off and you will see 3 pins. The middle one is for all of them, the upper one is for the resting throttle, the bottom one for the full throttle. Take your multimeter, detach the connector and measure the continuity. When the throttle lever is resting against the little wheel, you will hear a beeping sound. The potentiometer. The replacement is no hard work, but its calibration is a very demanding and delicate task. In order to check the potentiometer if it is bad or not, you must take your multimeter and measure the continuity. This is what you are going to be doing when the engine is stalled with the ignition off. Unplug the sensor position indicator. Measure the resistance between pins 1 and 2. If you get a nominal value from 3.6 up to 4.4 kilo ohms, the next step you are going to do is to deflect slowly the plate by hand. If the ohms increase smoothly and decrease again, then it's good. If not, you will have to replace the sensor. Replace the potentiometer every 150 kilometers or every 90,000 miles. The cold start valve. To check the electrical operation, unclip the stainless steel retainer on the electrical connector. Measure the coil for continuity. You should read about 10 ohms. If that's okay, you need to know if you're receiving an adequate supply to the terminals. The most reliable way of doing that is to measure the current flow through the solenoid. So set your multimeter to read DC amps. Expect 1.2 amps. If all that is okay, but the symptoms persist, you'll need to remove the cold start valve and watch it when simulating a cold start. Put the valve in a jar while connected to its cable and turn on the ignition. If you don't get a nice spray into a jar, the valve is shut. So that should be everything concerning the Ke-Jetronics. If you liked this video, then please like, share comment, and subscribe to the channel. And till the next video, happy Mercedesing. Bye.